We begin with breaking news from Washington, where the Senate has agreed unanimously to pass a bill forcing the Justice Department to release all files related to its investigation of convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. That's after the House of Representatives passed the bill by a vote of 427 to 1. President Donald Trump has already signaled that he will sign the bill once it gets to his desk, but it remains uncertain if federal prosecutors will unveil any documents shedding new light on Epstein's relationship with Trump, who claims he broke ties with the financier long ago.
Okay, so here's something you probably didn't expect to see in 2025. Congress actually agreeing on something, and not just any something. We're talking about forcing the Justice Department to release every single file they have on Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, that Jeffrey Epstein. The guy whose connections run so deep into Washington and Wall Street that people have been whispering about cover-ups for years. Here's what happened. The House of Representatives just passed something called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The vote? 427 to 1. Let that sink in for a second. When was the last time you saw Congress agree on literally anything with numbers like that? Can you believe this? We're talking about a building where people can't even agree on what day it is most of the time, and suddenly they're all on the same page about releasing files that could absolutely wreck some of the most powerful people in this country. This is the kind of vote you almost never see on anything, let alone something this explosive and this dangerous to the establishment. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. And this is where it gets wild, the Senate didn't even mess around. They didn't debate it. They didn't hold hearings. They didn't do their usual song and dance where they pretend to care about transparency while secretly trying to water everything down. Nope. Senate leaders from both parties just said, yeah, we're doing this, and passed it by unanimous consent. That means they sent it straight to President Trump's desk without any changes. No amendments, no delays, nothing. This is wild. Seriously, when does that ever happen? When do Democrats and Republicans suddenly hold hands and skip through the metal together on something this explosive? The answer is pretty much never, unless there's something so big, so dangerous to the entire establishment that they'd rather rip the Band-Aid off fast than let it fester. Think about it. The Senate moves slower than molasses most of the time. They debate everything. They amend everything. They hold endless hearings on the smallest details, but not this time. This time they just pushed it through like their hair was on fire. Now here's the thing that makes this even crazier. President Trump, the guy who's about to sign this thing into law, he didn't want this bill to pass, like at all. His people were calling Republicans behind the scenes, telling them to vote no. Trump himself was pushing back on this just days before the vote, and then boom, on November 17th, he completely flips. Suddenly he's telling House Republicans to support it. Suddenly he's saying he'll sign it if it gets to his desk. What changed? That's the question everyone in Washington is asking right now. What's in these files that made Trump go from blocking this thing to cheerleading for it in less than 48 hours? Are the files worse for Democrats? Are they worse for billionaire donors? Did someone show Trump what's actually in there and he decided it was better to control the narrative and fight it? Or did he realize the train was leaving the station, whether he was on board or not, and decided he'd rather be driving than getting run over? And let's talk about that one. No vote for a second. Out of 428 members of the House, only one person voted against transparency. One. That was Clay Higgins, a Republican from Louisiana, who said releasing the files could hurt innocent witnesses and family members. Okay, fair point, but come on. When 427 other people from both parties look at that same concern and say, nah, we need to do this anyway, you gotta wonder what they know that we don't. This bill isn't just some symbolic gesture either. It requires the Justice Department to publish everything online within about 30 days.
A massive political defeat for Donald Trump. And again, the box he's in is if he continues now to defy the will of the people. 81% of all Americans think that Donald Trump is hiding something and not releasing the files. If he defies the will of the House and the Senate and says it's an ongoing investigation, I can't release it, like he has done with his taxes for years and years and years by saying he's under audit, the political pressure and baggage just piles up for him. And if he releases them, we already know he's been briefed by his own Justice Department that his own name is in them. Which path? He's at the fork in the road. Which path do you think he chooses?
I think either way he chooses is perilous for him.
Every file, every document, every piece of evidence from the Epstein prosecution. And here's the kicker. They have to send an unredacted list to Congress, a list of every government official and politically exposed person whose name shows up in those records. No black boxes, no protecting the powerful, just names, raw names that could destroy careers and end political dynasties overnight. Think about what that means. We're talking about senators, governors, CEOs, donors, maybe even people in Trump's own circle. This thing could blow up Washington in ways we haven't seen in decades. And both parties just voted to make it happen. That tells you something, doesn't it? Either they've all decided transparency is suddenly more important than protecting their friends. Yeah, right. Or they're also worried about what the other side might be hiding, that they'd rather burn it all down together than let the other team control the story. So why now? Why is this happening in November 2025? What changed in Washington that suddenly made the untouchable files, the ones everyone's been whispering about for years, fair game? That's what we're going to break down, because this isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein anymore. This is about whether there's really a two-tier justice system in this country. This is about whether powerful people actually face consequences. And this is about what happens when Congress gets so desperate to look like they're doing something, anything, that they're willing to risk exposing their own. Let's break it down. All right, so let's talk about what this bill actually does, because the details here matter and they're way more interesting than most people realize. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is pretty straightforward. It tells the Department of Justice you have 30 days, publish everything. Publish everything, not summaries, not redacted versions, everything. Every interview, every piece of evidence, every document from the prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. And it all has to go online where anyone can read it. But here's where it gets really interesting. The bill also requires DOJ to send Congress a separate list, an unredacted list. This list has to include the names of every government official and every politically exposed person who shows up in those files. Now, politically exposed person is a fancy term that basically means anyone with power or influence. We're talking elected officials, appointed officials, major political donors, business leaders with government contracts, anyone whose name carries weight in Washington or Wall Street, and Congress gets to see all of it. No redactions, no privacy protections for the powerful, just names. This is unprecedented stuff, by the way. The government doesn't usually do this kind of mass document dump, especially when it involves people who are still alive and still powerful. Think about what that means for a second. We're talking about a list that could include current senators, current governors, people who are running for office in 2026, people who might run for president in 2028. This isn't ancient history. Some of these people are still in power right now. And in 30 days, assuming Trump signs this thing, their names could be public knowledge. Now let's rewind a bit and talk about how we got here, because this whole thing almost didn't happen. For weeks, maybe months, people close to President Trump were quietly telling Republicans in Congress not to touch this. The message was clear. This is a bad idea. This opens up too many cans of worms. We don't know who's going to get hurt here. Just let it die. And for a while, that strategy seemed to be working. The bill was sitting in committee. Nobody was talking about it publicly. It looked like it was just going to fade away like 1,000 other bills that never see the light of day. Washington is really good at making things disappear when powerful people want them gone. Bills get bottled up in committee. Chairmen refuse to schedule votes. And eventually, everyone forgets the bill ever existed. Then something changed. We don't know exactly what, but on November 17th, President Trump completely reversed course. He went from trying to kill this bill to actively promoting it. He called House Republicans and told them to vote yes. He put out a public statement saying he'd sign it if it reached his desk. Complete 180. Why? What happened in those 48 hours that changed Trump's mind? There are a few theories floating around Washington right now. Theory 1, Trump got a preview of what's in the files and realized they're worse for Democrats than for him. Maybe there are big names on the Democratic side, major donors to Democratic campaigns, people who've been loudly criticizing Trump for years, and suddenly releasing these files looks like a political win instead of a political risk. Theory 2, Trump realized he couldn't stop this. The momentum was building. Members of Congress from both parties were starting to talk about it publicly. The media was paying attention, and Trump decided it was better to get ahead of it, look like the transparency champion, than get caught trying to block it and feed into the whole cover-up narrative. Better to be the guy releasing the information than the guy trying to hide it. Theory 3, and this is the cynical one, Trump knows exactly who's in those files and he wants to use it as leverage. Release the list, let everyone sweat for a few weeks, see who comes crawling to make deals or offer concessions. It's classic Trump strategy. Create chaos, control the aftermath. We don't know which theory is right. Maybe it's all three, maybe it's none of them. But what we do know is that Trump's flip happened fast, and it happened right before a vote that was going to pass anyway, which tells you he was reading the room and decided he didn't want to be on the losing side of this fight. Now let's talk about that vote. 427-1. That's insane. When do you ever see numbers like that on anything controversial? The answer is pretty much never. Even bills that seem totally uncontroversial, like naming a post office after a beloved local figure, you still get a handful of no votes because some people just vote no on principle or they're not paying attention or whatever. Congress can barely agree on what to order for lunch most days. But this got 427 yes votes from Democrats and Republicans, from progressives and conservatives, from Trump allies and Trump critics. Everyone looked at this bill and said, yeah, we're doing this. What does that tell you? It tells you that members of Congress are more afraid of looking like they're protecting Epstein's associates than they are of what might be in those files. And that's a big deal, because there are almost certainly members of Congress whose friends, whose donors, whose political allies are going to be named in these documents. But they voted yes anyway, because the political cost of voting no, of looking like you're part of a cover-up, was just too high. The only person who voted no was Clay Higgins, and his reasoning was actually pretty reasonable. He said releasing these files could hurt innocent people, witnesses who cooperated with investigators, family members of victims, people whose names are in the files but who didn't do anything wrong. And yeah, that's a fair concern. There's always collateral damage when you release stuff like this. Innocent people get caught in the crossfire. Reputations get destroyed based on guilt by association. But here's the thing. 427 other people looked at that concern and decided, nope, transparency is more important. We need to know who was connected to Jeffrey Epstein and what they did. Even if some innocent people get dragged into the mess, even if some families get hurt, the public's right to know outweighs the risk. That's a pretty stark calculation, and it tells you how much pressure Congress is feeling right now to look like they're holding powerful people accountable. Then we get to the Senate, and this is where things get even weirder. The Senate could have debated this, they could have held hearings, they could have amended it, they could have done literally anything to slow it down or water it down or add protections for certain people, but they didn't. Senate leaders from both parties just said we're passing this by unanimous consent and sent it straight to Trump. The whole process took hours, not weeks or months like most legislation. Unanimous consent means nobody objected. Not one senator stood up and said, wait, let's think about this. In a body where a single senator can grind everything to a halt if they want to, nobody did. They all just let it go through. Why? Same reason as the House. Nobody wants to be the person who looks like they're protecting Jeffrey Epstein's friends. Nobody wants to be the senator who stood in the way of transparency when election season is right around the corner. So they all just went along with it. Even the ones who probably have serious concerns about what this is going to do to their donors or their colleagues or their own reputations. And now it's sitting on Trump's desk, and Trump has said he's going to sign it, which means in about 30 days, assuming nothing changes, we're going to see a list of names, a list of powerful people who were connected to one of the most notorious criminals in modern American history. This is happening, and both parties just made it happen together, which might be the wildest part of this whole story. So let's break down what this actually means, because this isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein anymore. This is about way bigger stuff. First, this is about accountability, or the illusion of accountability, depending on how cynical you want to be. For years, people have been saying there's a two-tier justice system in this country. Rich people, connected people, they get away with stuff that would put regular folks in prison for decades. And Epstein became the poster child for that. The guy was connected to presidents, princes, billionaires, and he got a sweetheart plea deal in Florida that let him avoid serious federal charges for years. Then when he finally got arrested again in 2019, he died in jail under suspicious circumstances, and everyone just kind of moved on. His associate Ghislaine Maxwell got convicted, but the rest of the story just faded away. No other arrests, no other prosecutions, just whispers about who else was involved and why they weren't being held accountable. The whole thing felt like justice stopped halfway, and everyone pretended that was good enough. This bill is Congress's attempt to look like they're fixing that. Whether they actually are, we'll find out in 30 days, but the fact that 427 representatives and the entire Senate just signed off on releasing these files, that's them trying to send a message. We hear you. We know you're angry about two-tier justice. We're doing something about it. Of course, the cynical read is that they're only doing this because they think it's going to hurt their political enemies more than their allies. Democrats probably think the files are going to expose Trump world connections. Republicans probably think they're going to expose Clinton world connections. And both sides are willing to roll the dice because they think they're going to win. But here's the thing. When you release files like this, you don't get to control what's in them. Both parties might be in for a very unpleasant surprise. And that's why this is so fascinating. They're both gambling that they've calculated the political fallout correctly. One of them is probably wrong. Maybe both of them are wrong. Maybe the files are going to blow up people on both sides equally, and we're about to see the biggest political scandal in modern American history. Second, this is about the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential race. Because those names that are about to come out, some of them are definitely people who are running for office right now or planning to run in the next few years, and campaigns are about to get very interesting. Imagine you're a senator up for re-election in 2026 and your name shows up in the Epstein files. Even if you didn't do anything illegal, even if your connection was totally innocent. Good luck explaining that to voters. Your opponent is going to run ads. The media is going to write stories. You're going to spend the entire campaign trying to defend yourself instead of talking about your record or your policies. Or imagine you're thinking about running for president in 2028, and suddenly your name is on a list of people who are connected to Jeffrey Epstein in some way. That's not a scandal you can easily overcome. That's a campaign ender for most people. The timing of this couldn't be worse for anyone with political ambitions. We're heading into a midterm election year, and then right after that comes the 2028 presidential race. This list is going to hang over Washington like a dark cloud for the next 3 years. Every candidate is going to have to answer questions about it. Every debate is going to include questions about who knew what and when. It's going to dominate the news cycle for months, maybe years. So this list is about to reshape American politics in ways we can't fully predict yet. And both parties just voted to make it happen, which means either they've done the math and decided they can survive it, or they're about to realize they made a huge mistake. Third, this is about Trump himself, because he's the one who has to sign this bill, and that signature is going to define part of his legacy. If Trump signs it and the files blow up Washington, he gets to position himself as the transparency president, the guy who wasn't afraid to release the truth even when it was uncomfortable, even when it hurt powerful people, even when his own allies were probably begging him not to do it. That's a powerful narrative, and Trump loves powerful narratives. But if Trump signs it and the files end up exposing people close to him, if there are Trump donors or Trump allies or people in Trump's orbit whose names show up on that list, then he's going to take heat for that too. His critics are going to say he knew what was coming and he did it anyway. Or worse, that he released the files to distract from something else. They're going to accuse him of using the files as a political weapon against his enemies while accepting that some of his friends might get caught in the blast radius. And if Trump doesn't sign it, if he finds some reason to veto it or pocket veto it or delay it, then he feeds directly into the cover-up narrative. His opponents will say he's protecting powerful people. They'll say he's part of the problem. They'll use it against him in every possible way. So Trump is in a no-win situation here. Well, not quite no-win, but definitely high risk. And the fact that he flipped from opposing this bill to supporting it tells you he's already made his calculation. He thinks signing it is less risky than fighting it. We'll see if he's right. The smart money says he signs it, holds a big press conference, and frames himself as the guy who finally brought transparency to Washington. That's the Trump playbook. Take something that could hurt you and spin it into a victory. Whether that works this time depends entirely on what's actually in those files, and nobody outside a very small circle knows that yet. But we're about to find out, and that's what makes it so fascinating. Fourth, and this is the big one, this is about trust, or the complete lack of it. Because the fact that Congress felt they had to pass this bill, the fact that 427 representatives and the entire Senate said, yeah, we don't trust DOJ to do the right thing on their own, that tells you how broken the relationship between Congress and the executive branch has become. This bill exists because members of Congress, and by extension their constituents, don't believe the Justice Department would ever release these files voluntarily. They don't trust DOJ to be transparent. They don't trust them to hold powerful people accountable, so they're forcing the issue with legislation. And that's a pretty damning statement about where we are as a country right now. We've reached a point where Congress has to pass laws to force transparency on something that should have been transparent from the beginning. We've reached a point where both parties are so convinced the system is rigged that they're willing to blow it up just to prove they're on the side of accountability. Think about what that means for how government is supposed to work. The Justice Department is supposed to pursue justice independently. Congress is supposed to provide oversight, and the public is supposed to trust that the system works. But none of that is happening here. Congress doesn't trust DOJ. The public doesn't trust either of them. And so we get this kind of legislation, bills that wouldn't need to exist if the institutions were functioning the way they're supposed to. This is what happens when faith in government breaks down completely, when nobody believes the people in power will do the right thing unless they're forced to by law. So where does this leave us? Well, Trump's probably going to sign this thing. He's already said he will, and backing out now would be worse than going through with it, which means in about a month, we're going to see those files, we're going to see that list of names, and Washington is going to lose its mind. Some of those names are going to be shocking. Some are going to be expected. Some are going to end careers. Some are going to spawn new investigations. And some are probably going to be totally innocent people who just happen to know Epstein in some tangential way and are about to get dragged through the mud anyway. That's the cost of transparency in a case like this. You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to protect the good guys and only expose the bad guys. You release everything and let the chips fall where they may. And Congress just decided that's a price worth paying, both parties together, which tells you just how desperate they are to look like they're doing something, anything, to restore faith in the system. Will it work? Probably not, but it's going to be one heck of a show. This is the kind of story that changes Washington, the kind that people remember for decades, the kind that ends careers and starts investigations, and maybe, just maybe, actually holds some powerful people accountable for once. And we're about to watch it happen in real time. Next 30 days are going to be absolutely wild. Buckle up, stay tuned,